kindly refrain from placing anything in a haphazard manner. Tales of betrayal. A genuine account of infidelity. Your support is invaluable. A staggering 90% of our viewers have yet to join our community, and we invite you to lend your support in our quest to continue crafting captivating content. We invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. We invite you to share your location with us. Please drop your city in the comments below. The evening when everything I knew shattered commenced in a manner strikingly ordinary. It was a Wednesday, seemingly ordinary and predictable, until it took an unexpected turn. I arrived home earlier than my usual hour, anticipating nothing beyond the familiar evening rituals shared with my wife, Sophie. Yet, as I crossed the threshold, an unsettling sensation washed over me. Her voice drifted up from upstairs, slightly muffled yet distinct enough to capture the warmth woven into her tone. Indeed, my dear, today was nothing short of extraordinary. Every moment was a delight. I halted abruptly, caught in a moment of stillness. My heart raced. Sophie had never expressed herself in such a manner regarding her job. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar. My instincts urged me to turn on my heel, to feign ignorance of the words that had just reached my ears. Yet a more potent force, an unwavering doubt, held my feet firmly where they stood. I inched nearer, my gaze fixed on her as she pivoted away from the mirror. She was changing clothes while talking on the phone, wearing unfamiliar attire I hadn't seen before, a lingerie style I had never encountered before. I gritted my teeth, battling the urge to speak. "Very well, I must take my leave," she whispered softly. "He will return home shortly. Until tomorrow, charming, attractive." The call concluded, and she gracefully removed her blouse, revealing herself in nothing but the exquisite matching lace ensemble. Thoughts whirled in my mind, desperately seeking a rational explanation. Yet as she faced the mirror once more, my breath hitched in my throat. I noticed a small mark on her side that I didn't recognize. Sophie inhaled sharply, her fingertips gliding over the mark. She muttered a curse under her breath. I must conceal this matter. My stomach churned. I retreated from the threshold. My thoughts swirl in a chaotic tempest. Was I merely conjuring illusions, leaping to hasty judgments? The evidence was unmistakably present, clear and evident for all to see. For 2 decades, I held steadfast in my belief in our marriage, placing my trust in her without a hint of doubt. Was it all just an illusion? Proof was essential. I compelled myself to act, to clarify my thoughts. Were I to confront her at this moment, she would surely refute all claims. I sought evidence, irrefutable proof of her treachery. With deliberate precision, I reached for her phone resting on the nightstand. The display was secured. My heart raced with intensity. Passcodes had never been part of our experience until now. That marked the second warning sign. I placed the phone gently on the surface and surveyed the surroundings. The blouse rested in a wrinkled heap upon the bed. I grasped it, drawing in a deep breath. Shaving cream, though not of my own choosing. Profound unease took root in my chest. I hurried down the stairs, seized a compact DVR camera from the garage, and made my way back to the bedroom. I placed a small recording device discreetly in the closet, positioned just so to record every moment unfolding in the room. Next, I faced her laptop, confronted by yet another password. Never before had I experienced such a profound sense of alienation within the very walls that once embraced me. Having exhausted all other possibilities, I took hold of my keys and stepped out. My hands trembled as I dialed Sophie's number. "Hey babe," I said, maintaining a steady tone. "The situation at work is chaotic. I shall procure dinner as I make my way homeward." She paused, contemplating her response. "I understood. Take care." The relief in her voice was unmistakable. She believed she had ample time, yet I was already 10 steps ahead. I found myself in a secluded dive bar on the other side of town, the sort of establishment where inquiries were scarce, allowing one to linger in solitude with their musings and a strong beverage. A woman stationed behind the counter offered a warm smile as she drew near. It was my first time here, and I nodded in acknowledgement. A challenging day. I released a sound that echoed emptily. Something along those lines. With a graceful motion, She sent a gin and tonic gliding across the bar's polished surface. Here's to brighter days on the horizon. The flavor of the drink barely graced my palate. My thoughts wandered to distant realms. Returning home, I found myself revisiting Sophie's words, that infuriating bruise lingering in my mind. When I finally arrived home, the clock had already struck past 11. The dwelling lay shrouded in shadows. I slipped beneath the covers, my thoughts swirling in a chaotic dance. Sophie shifted gently next to me. "You're late," she whispered, her voice laced with drowsiness. "Indeed," I responded. The day stretched on endlessly. With a soft sigh, she inched nearer. "Lately, your absence has been keenly felt." I felt a jolt of electricity as her fingers glided across my arm. Perhaps there was a time when I would have placed my trust in her words. Yet now, at that moment, I found myself utterly unaware of the identity of the person beside me. Exhausted, I murmured, shifting my gaze. With a moment of uncertainty, she turned onto her side. "Perhaps in a few days' time?" I remained silent. Once she succumbed to slumber, I quietly emerged from the bed and fetched the DVR. My hands quivered as I connected it to my laptop. With a sudden burst, the screen illuminated the room. I observed Sophie emerge from the shower, her fingers lightly tracing the bruise once more. Her expression conveyed more than mere concern. It was a blend of frustration and guilt. In that moment, she engaged in an unusual act. With a graceful motion, she opened her dresser and retrieved a pair of flannel pajamas. Sophie always slept in her thickest pair, opting for shorts or nothing at all. Was she concealing the bruise, or was she shielding her own vulnerability? I closed the laptop, my heart racing. Tomorrow, the truth would reveal itself. At the break of dawn, I set out on my journey. I arrived late to work and headed directly to my friend, Jeff. He had encountered this scenario previously. His former spouse had betrayed him, and he discovered her infidelity in the very manner I intended to unveil Sophie's secrets. "Damn, man," Jeff muttered when I shared the news with him. "Are you certain?" I inclined my head in agreement. "Proof is essential." He let out a deep sigh. "I understand you completely." He presented me with a collection of compact audio recorders, identical to those he had utilized in his own endeavor. Inquiry. Position them throughout the home. Alone in her vehicle. If she harbors a secret, these will unveil it. Upon arriving home, a plan had formed in my mind. I tucked the first recorder beneath the couch, while another found its place in our bedroom, close to the nightstand. The third slipped into the air vent in the hallway, discreet yet positioned to detect any hint of the unusual. The final one I reserved for her vehicle. Under the cover of darkness, I conjured a late work call as my excuse to slip away. Once she succumbed to slumber, I stealthily ventured outside and discreetly placed the last recorder beneath her driver's seat. As I lay down, fatigue enveloped me, yet a fierce resolve lingered within. Tomorrow I shall begin to listen. Tomorrow the truth would reveal itself to me. Mary's revelation took me by surprise. This unexpected twist in our dialogue caught me off guard. She let out a long breath, her grip on Mike's hand growing firmer. In my youth, filled with desperation, I stumbled through choices that now weigh heavily on my conscience. Yet Mike, he perceived something within me that remained unseen by others. Rather than discarding me, he offered me a choice: to allow my past to shape my identity or to strive for something greater. I made the decision to stand and confront the challenge ahead. I observed Mike as he gently squeezed her hand, offering a sense of reassurance. "That is why I owe him everything," she concluded, her voice now unwavering. While I appreciated her candor, my thoughts wandered to distant realms. With each passing second, the reason for my presence became increasingly clear. The treachery, the deceit, the painful realization that my wife was drifting away from me in silence. Mike seemed to pick up on the tension, for he cleared his throat and remarked, "Let's return to the matter at hand, Dave." I nodded, dismissing the fleeting wave of sentimentality. Indeed. After settling the bill for lunch, we exited the bar, my thoughts already swirling with anticipation for what lay ahead. Returning to the motel, we completed the surveillance arrangement, with minuscule cameras cleverly concealed and microphones calibrated to capture every whisper. Should Lauren and Julian cross paths here once more, I would possess all that I require. Now we wait, Mike remarked, his gaze fixed on the receiver. Patience was never my forte. As Mike busied himself with packing, I took out my phone and delved once more into the depths of Will. This time, I delved deeper, exploring social media, property records, and previous employers. It was at that moment that something fresh seized my focus. An application for divorce submitted 8 months prior. Lauren had mentioned that he was married, ensnared in a relationship devoid of love. However, court documents reveal that he was no longer married. Had she been untruthful? Had Julian deceived her? Mike, I said, gesturing towards my screen. Behold this. He knitted his brows in displeasure. So he has remained unattached all this while? It appears so. Mike let out a sharp breath. This alters the course of events. If your wife believes he is still married, he is exerting manipulation over her. If she is aware of his single status, then it is she who is deceiving you. Neither response brought me any solace. That night, I arrived home with an air of normalcy, as though nothing had shifted in the fabric of my reality. Yet within me, a fire of questions raged. Lauren welcomed me at the threshold, her smile radiant, her eyes inviting, utterly at ease. "Hey there, handsome," she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "The evening meal is nearly prepared. It has a delightful aroma," I responded, striving to maintain a nonchalant demeanor. In the cozy confines of the living room, Ben and Lily found themselves half engaged in a show, their attention divided as they scrolled through their phones. All appeared to be as it should, yet I was acutely aware of the underlying truth. I engaged in light conversation, savoring the dish she had prepared. Yet, each laugh, each glance, each fleeting moment seemed overshadowed. That evening, as she nestled next to me in bed, I struggled against the instinct to withdraw. Instead, I murmured, "I love you, Lauren." She paused for a brief moment. Then she softly replied, "I love you too, Mark." A falsehood. I understood it at last. It was evident in the way she paused. She understood it in the manner that required her contemplation. At the break of dawn, she departed from the house, embracing the quiet of the early hours. She mentioned that she was getting together with some friends for brunch. I found it hard to believe. Mike and I sat idling down the street, waiting for her to emerge from the confines of the driveway. "Here we go," Mike murmured, his gaze fixed intently on her car. We trailed behind, maintaining a discreet distance, careful to remain unseen. 15 minutes later, she glided into the parking lot of a quaint little cafe. I braced myself, anticipating Julian's presence. Instead, she encountered a woman in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed, a figure unfamiliar to me. With warm smiles, they exchanged greetings, settled into a table by the window, and began their conversation. Just as I was ready to dismiss it as insignificant, Mike gave me a gentle nudge. "Observe her body language," he instructed. "She feels a flutter of anxiety." I peered more intently. He was indeed correct. Lauren's eyes flitted about the room, her fingers drumming lightly against the table's edge. The other woman drew closer, her voice a mere whisper, her demeanor grave. "What is this concerning?" I whispered under my breath. Mike retrieved his phone and focused the lens, attempting to decipher their unspoken words through the movement of their lips. "Just a moment," he replied. "I may manage to grasp a handful of words." We watched as the conversation grew heated. Lauren looked upset. The woman extended her arm over the table, clasping her hand in a desperate plea. Then, with an air of dramatic revelation, she retrieved her phone and revealed something to Lauren. Lauren's complexion faded to a ghostly hue. With a swift motion, she seized the phone from the woman's grasp, her eyes widening in disbelief as she absorbed the contents of the screen. "What on earth is that?" I murmured. Lauren shook her head vigorously, repeating a phrase incessantly. The woman replied with conviction, as though she were issuing a cautionary note. In silence, she rose from her seat and departed, leaving no trace of her presence behind. Lauren lingered at the table, her gaze vacant and unfocused. My heart raced with intensity. What has just transpired? I inquired of Mike. I'm not sure yet, he replied. But I have a feeling we've just uncovered something far more significant than we anticipated. That evening's transformation upon Lauren's return home that evening. A palpable shift enveloped her. She seemed altered, subdued, and more remote than before. There was an unsettling quality to that conversation that had left her rattled. I pretended not to notice, acting as if my mind was on work. But I watched her carefully, waiting for her to slip up. At long last, she took the plunge. In the stillness of the night, believing I was lost in slumber, she quietly descended the stairs. I pursued. She retrieved her laptop and accessed her email account. I stole a glance from the hallway, my heart racing with anticipation. Just as she began to type, the phone rang. Her voice came through on the very first ring. "What is it that you desire?" She murmured softly. A moment of stillness. "Absolutely not, I will not withdraw. I simply require a moment to gather my thoughts." Another pause. "Okay, Wednesday. But this is the last time." She ended the call and erased the record of it. I just managed to return upstairs before she arrived. My heart raced as I pretended to be asleep. Midweek. It was the day she had envisioned for their reunion. This time I would be the one waiting. Wednesday dawned, and I found myself akin to a solitary figure poised at the precipice of a great chasm. For the past 2 days, I had observed Lauren with keen attention, yet she revealed nothing of her thoughts or intentions. Whatever the woman at the cafe had told her had shaken her, yet she carried on as if everything was normal. But I knew better. At last, I possessed undeniable evidence. Dates, locations, call logs, and footage were all meticulously gathered. Yet, the complete truth still eluded me. Today was all about that. Before Lauren had even departed from the house, Mike and I were already settled in at the motel. The surveillance cameras hummed with anticipation, the audio devices poised for action. "Do you truly believe you can manage this?" Mike inquired while I remained rigidly poised before the screen. I tightened my grip, my fists balling up in determination. I must witness it firsthand. We observed as Lauren's car glided into the parking lot. A knot formed in my espanac as I spotted Will already waiting. He acted without a moment's pause. As she emerged from the car, he enveloped her in a warm, tight embrace. I clenched my jaw tightly. A brief exchange of words passed between them before they made their way indoors. This was the moment. I amplified the audio feed and tuned in closely. The room, though modest in size, was tastefully adorned with fine furnishings. Lauren perched on the edge of the bed, her gaze fixed on Julian as he strode back and forth, his face a mask of inscrutability. "You've been behaving oddly," he remarked. "What did she share with you?" Lauren swept her fingers through her hair, releasing a deep sigh. "She confided in me. She mentioned that you are not married." Stillness. "You deceived me, Will." Julian let out a breath, his head shaking in disbelief. "I did not deceive. I simply chose not to correct you." Lauren released a sardonic chuckle. "That is identical." He settled next to her, extending his hands toward hers. "Hear me out. I never intended to let you go. You repeatedly insisted that this was just a fleeting moment, that your commitment to Mark would never waver. Had I revealed my single status, would you have regarded it with sincerity?" Lauren withdrew. Her expression was a tapestry of conflicting emotions. "I'm uncertain." Breath eluded me, a fleeting whisper in the chaos. "She confessed it." Julian lowered his voice, infusing it with a gentler cadence. "I cherish you, Lauren. You're aware of that. And if you truly reflect on your feelings, you know you love me as well." She gently shut her eyes. "Please, Will. One can no longer maintain the facade. If you were truly dissatisfied with Mark, you wouldn't find yourself in this moment, here and now." I tightened my fists, my whole body trembling. Lauren inhaled deeply. "This must come to an end." Julian tensed. "What is this?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I can no longer endure this, Will. It was an error. Everything." In my astonishment, I nearly overlooked Julian's response. His jaw clenched, and his eyes grew shadowy. "An error?" His voice resonated with a dangerously low timbre. Lauren inclined her head in agreement. My heart is filled with affection for my husband. I found myself entangled in a situation I ought to have avoided, yet I cannot continue to inflict pain upon him. Julian emitted a dry, humorless chuckle. What does it matter? Are you really going to just turn and leave? She rose to her feet. Indeed, he sprang after her. Your words fail to convince me. Lauren's voice quivered with emotion. Please, Will, let's not complicate this any further. Julian grabbed her hand tightly, his face a mask of inscrutability. I sacrificed it all for you, Lauren. You cannot simply walk away. At that moment, Mike quietly declared, That's enough, and made his way to the door, yet I seized his arm. No, I replied, my teeth clenched tightly together. Not at this moment. Julian's fingers curled firmly around Lauren's wrist. You were meant to stand apart. Will, release your grip. You professed your love for me. Lauren's voice trembled with emotion. I believed I had it right, yet I was mistaken. Julian emitted a measured, mirthless chuckle. Oh, how you mirror the crowd. Lauren wrenched her arm away. Farewell, Will. As she began to walk away, he suddenly lost control. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice laced with shadows. Step through that door, and I assure you, regret will follow you. Lauren stood still, her body rigid with surprise. Are you implying a threat towards me? Julian advanced with a deliberate, measured step. Consider your next steps with great care. In that moment, I resolved to take action. I gently nudged the door ajar. Lauren inhaled sharply, her gaze ensnared by mine. Is that you, Mark? Julian's expression contorted in disbelief. As I crossed the threshold, I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Do you have a message for my wife? I inquired with an icy demeanor. Julian raised his chin. This matter does not concern you. With determination, I advanced another step. You couldn't be more mistaken. Lauren was in tears. Mark, I silenced her with a glance. Not at this moment. She gulped, her head bobbing in agreement. Julian let out a derisive laugh. So, you've arrived here to battle for her, have you? I chose not to respond. Instead, I directed my attention to Lauren. Let us embark on this journey. She paused briefly, then took a step closer to me. Julian let out a harsh, mirthless laugh. So, you're actually picking him instead of me? Lauren brushed away her tears. Regret lingers in my mind. I should have never selected you in the first place. His expression clouded, yet he made no move to hinder her as she glided by. I stepped out after her, but before crossing the threshold, I cast one last glance back at him. Have you any intention of approaching my wife again? I spoke in a hushed, menacing voice, and you will come to regret it. In that moment, I beheld a glimmer of fear flickering in his eyes. With no further utterance, I closed the door softly behind me. The journey back was enveloped in silence. Lauren gazed out the window, dabbing at her tears intermittently. As we rolled into the driveway, she glanced over at me. Will you abandon me? I clutched the steering wheel with a firm grasp. I'm uncertain. She exhaled unsteadily. It was never my intention to cause you pain. Yet you did, I murmured softly. She nodded, new tears streaming down her cheeks. I am willing to go to any lengths to resolve this issue. Everything. I pivoted to meet her gaze, a heaviness settling in my chest, a sharp reminder of the ache within. All I require is a moment, I expressed. At last, she gave a nod of agreement. Very well. We lingered in silence for what felt like an eternity. In silence, we crossed the threshold into our home. Yet, I was acutely aware that regardless of what unfolded next, everything would irrevocably change. The stillness that enveloped our home was overwhelming. Upon uncovering the truth, upon witnessing Lauren in that motel room, upon listening to her confess that she believed she loved him, I found it impossible to return to the way things once were. I stayed in the guest room that night to gather my thoughts. Lauren attempted to grant me the distance I sought, yet the anguish in her gaze was unmistakable each time I turned away. My intentions were never to inflict harm. I found myself at a loss, uncertain of the path ahead. For years, I held steadfast to the notion of us, to the promises we exchanged. to the conviction that we were united as one. At this moment, the foundation lay fractured. What could possibly be more disheartening? I was uncertain whether it could ever be mended. 3 days following the confrontation, Lauren gently rapped on the door of the guest room. "Mark, may we have a conversation?" With a moment's pause, I contemplated the act of opening it. She appeared utterly drained, with shadows lingering beneath her eyes and her complexion a ghostly white. She entered, her hands twisting nervously. "I understand that I may not be worthy of your forgiveness. I find myself questioning whether I am worthy of this dialogue. However, I must express this." I remained quiet. She inhaled unsteadily. "I made a mistake. I have betrayed you, and I deeply regret what I've done. I cannot justify my actions in any way. There is no justification. It was an act of selfishness, a display of recklessness, and a manifestation of cruelty." I tightened my jaw. Lauren's voice trembled. "Yet I promise you, Mark, my love for you has never wavered. I have become unmoored." I persuaded myself that there was something elusive I had yet to grasp. Yet the reality is all that I ever required was present within my grasp. I was unable to perceive it. My gaze lingered on her. "My emotions are a tangled web. If your love for me was genuine, Lauren, then what compelled you to act in that way?" Her cheeks glistened with tears. "Due to my fragility, I sought answers beyond my own being, unaware that the true issue lay within me all along." She inhaled deeply, striving to regain her composure. "The conclusion has been reached. I expressed to him my desire to sever all ties. If you grant me this opportunity, I will dedicate my entire life to demonstrating that my heart belongs solely to you." I gazed upon the woman I had devoted years of my heart to, the woman who had shattered me in ways I never imagined could exist. "Do you genuinely believe we can recover from this?" I inquired softly. She gulped with difficulty. "I'm uncertain, yet I am prepared to make an attempt." That evening, I found myself solitary in the living room, gazing at a faded wedding photograph of us. I reflected on the years filled with joy, as well as those marked by hardship. I reflected on the instances of joy, the instances of hardship. I reflected on the woman who captured my heart. The woman, who had once betrayed me, now found herself pleading for my presence to remain. There were 2 paths before me: turn your back and begin anew, remain and endeavor to reconstruct. The journey along both paths was fraught with anguish. Neither possessed any assurances. Yet ultimately, I was aware of my conclusion. The following morning, Lauren discovered me in the kitchen, preparing coffee. She lingered in the doorway, uncertainty etched across her features. "Mark, I'm not going anywhere," I interjected, her lips parted in astonishment. "Are you not?" A deep sigh escaped my lips. "Today, I find myself uncertain about the possibility of forgiveness for you, perhaps not even in the coming week. Yet I am prepared to make the attempt." Her visage contorted, and new tears cascaded down her cheeks. "Thank you," she murmured softly. I chose not to respond. I merely wished for us to rediscover our path home. For despite the fractures that defined us, I found myself unwilling to release my grip.